Thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings. Here's the deal. $5 on any fighter this week. The UFC 273 card, $100 in free play bets. Win or lose, guaranteed. All right, with the Don, William, Brad Alice, I'm merely Mike Luke. Hello, William.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah, let's get to it. We got some football to get to first. Spring game tomorrow. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the first time in quite a while when I've actually been somewhat enthused by the U of A U of A football spring proposition, mainly because you've got some real talent that's coming in this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to temper my enthusiasm because the spring game is a lot like the red-blue game.
Correct.
I mean, if a guy goes crazy, it doesn't mean much. The most important thing about this weekend, honestly, is the 20 or 30 kids who are going to be watching as recruits. It's a nice cap to spring ball. Spring ball, very important. You get guys a lot of reps. You get to kind of start to create the separation. You know, every once in a while in the spring game, we've seen a kid, show that he's a gamer. I think maybe Khalil Tate's a good example. He had a pretty good spring game. Mm-hmm. And that kind of put him back on the radar. I think what it does more than anything, I think it shows you who can't play.
Correct.
A couple years ago, and I don't want to drag the kid through the mud, there was a quarterback. The big knock on him was he was a slow decision maker. He took 5 dropbacks, and on 3 of them, he was slow with his decisions.
Right.
So if Jonah Coleman looks great, cool. If he doesn't look great, it doesn't mean Jonah Coleman's not going to be a good player. Thanks, Gary Lewis, for the suggestion. If T-Mac only has 2 catches for 12 yards, it doesn't mean he's a bust. Just like if some walk-on against the third-string defense has 80 yards on 4 catches, doesn't mean he's going to be a star. But it's fun to go out. I've seen some people critical. This, why is it a spectacle? Why have Brewski? Why have Adia? Why have Lance Briggs? Why? Because that's what spring games are for. It's a celebration of the end. It is for optics. It is to sell season tickets. It's to sell the program to those, again, 30 or 40, or I don't even know how many kids are coming. Seems like my Twitter feed, all it is people retweeting. Right. I'm going to be in Tucson. That's what it's for. Do I want to see how the offensive line plays? Yes. Do I want to see how much bigger the Harris brothers looked in the end of the season? Yeah. Do I want to see Jonah Coleman, who may be my spirit animal? Yes. But at the same time, again, if Coleman rushes 2 times for 3 yards, then I'm not going to be disappointed. If he breaks off a big run, then yeah, I might go get that jersey a little bit quicker.
Last year, Brad, the one thing that always kind of stuck out to me was just the lack of dynamic ability at the skill position players. Now, again, I'm not saying, and I think there's a lot of blame to go around. Quite frankly, Gunnar Cruz, not good enough. Will Plummer, a little bit better, but still not good enough. The wide receiver position is going to be fascinating this year, and we're going to go back to quarterback in a second. But you bring in a guy, Jacob Cowing, who you catch for 1,400 yards at UTEP. Granted, it's not Power 5, and you could have offers to every school in the country. Cowing can obviously play. When you got Tatora McMillan, 5-star wide receiver, this is a guy that could have gone anywhere he wants. I think the influx of talent at the receiver position is going to be something to really keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I want to see how some of the guys who did play last year look now, or didn't play last year, like Majan Wright. Mm-hmm. Is he as good as we maybe thought he could be? Or, I'm trying to think of the kid's name, but the kid who was the walk-on last year who got the scholarship. How do some of the guys who had
Dorian Singer,
how do some of the guys who played limited roles look? Of course, I want to see T-Mac. Of course, I want to see, Cowling, but I want to see these other guys too, because I think that's going to be the key to this position is Cowling and T-Mac. For the first time, you have a chance to have 2 guys who can be a number 1 receiver. Right. I'm not sure this program's had a number 1 receiver since Jaron Kreiner. Even last year, as good as Barry Hill was. Barry Hill's a number 2 receiver on a very good football team. I mean, I don't mean no disrespect. And a number 2 receiver can play in the NFL. So I'm not saying he's not good, but at SC, he'd be playing behind Drake London. Now you have 2 guys who can legitimately compete, at least in theory, for that number 1 and 2 role. So now I want to see, is Majan Wright your 3? Is Dorian Singer your 3? What's Damari's long-term prognosis when healthy? Because suddenly you've got 5, 6, you look at the other big receivers coming in. You look at
you got a kid like a Kevin Green who's been there, who's played well, who's an ex-USC decommit.
Yeah, so suddenly, if let's be honest, if Kevin Green's your number 3, Majan Wright's your 4, Dorian Singer's your 5, that's a good wide receiver room. When Dorian Singer was, for parts of last year, your number 1, that's when you have a problem. So, yeah, this is the deepest the receiver room, while also being top-heavy, has been since probably the Stoops era.
Let's talk now a little bit of Jayden de Laura. Jayden de Laura was the guy to me when I really figured out, and again, it's not that we didn't know that it's like, man, Jedd Fisch is a little bit different here as a recruiter, because this is a kid that he's not unproven. I mean, he was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year 2 years ago. He's put up big numbers. He could have gone to a lot of different places, and the fact that he hit the portal in Arizona, which didn't have a good offense last year, and he signed on pretty quickly, that really showed me that you had something a little bit different going on with Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff.
Yeah, I think what you look at is, but he also saw an opportunity. And let's be honest, even though the quarterback history at Washington State blows Arizona out of the water, where would you rather be the number 1 quarterback? Tucson, Arizona, or Pullman, Washington? And I think something you can't discount, and these numbers may be different now. I know when Anu Solomon was the starting quarterback, Arizona had more Polynesian starting quarterbacks than any school in the nation, including Hawaii. There is actually a tradition here of Polynesian quarterbacks, that goes back to George Mala'ulu under Tomey, and through Bryson Burney and Willie Tuitama and Anu Solomon and a few other guys down the line. But de Laura saw a situation where, frankly, the other guys just weren't good enough. And again, I liked McLeod last year, but de Laura is an upgrade. I actually still can't figure out why Gunnar Cruz fell off the map as quick as he did, but that's not my job. He did. But now you suddenly got a quarterback room with 3 pretty good guys. And if de Laura can repeat what he did last year and improve upon it, Arizona could have a pretty good offense.
Yeah, and I look at it too. Let's talk a little bit about Jonah Coleman. Last year at the running back spot, I thought they were, Drake Anderson's okay. Michael Wiley's okay. I mean, they're Power 5 players. The only guy that I ever really looked at and I said maybe there's a little bit something more there was a guy that didn't play a lot. Jalen John interested me a little bit there when I saw him. But now Jonah Coleman is just kind of like Jayden de Laura in that he's walking into a position right there where I think he's got a real chance to be able to get some carries and get some carries early.
Yeah, I think when you mix Coleman with the guys who came back, and I think you excluded Stevie Rocker there as well.
I apologize.
Who may have of the returners may have the highest ceiling. Whether he gets there or not, I don't know. And I like Jalen John. I thought he was underutilized.
Right.
But again, you have this kind of room by committee, but Coleman's intriguing because not only is he, a fast little kind of scat bat, but he's built like a fullback. And again, excuse me, the fact that people are like worried about his height has nothing.
Who cares? He could be 4'10". And if he can do what you need him to do, running back is that one spot. Who really matter? It doesn't really matter.
No, and durability is not based on height. It's based on build. And he's built like a Warwick Dunn, who at 5'7" played in the NFL for a decade. I mean, the kid is, again, when I say he's my spirit animal, it's because he's built like I wish I was when I played ball. Because we're about.
Oh, Brad, don't minimize yourself.
We're probably about the same height, and unfortunately, I weigh more than him, but not in a good way. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do. And again, as part of the short man Hall of Fame committee selection committee, I'm ready to put him on the short running back Mount Rushmore at Arizona, along with guys like Antoine Carter, David Adams, and our boy J.J. Taylor.
Well, let's also not forget, and we're going to get to this in just a second, a relative Rayshon Speedy Luke. Many people think that we're related. To my knowledge, we are not related. But
I'm going to keep you related to him like I assume Juju Smith-Schuster is related to John Schuster.
There's got to, in some way, there's some, I'm just looking at it. There's just no way that Juju Smith-Schuster isn't somehow related to John Schuster.
I think he's his great-grandson.
Brad, have I ever told you
steering to the Chiefs?
For sure, right? That was it. That was a sneaky good signing right there, all things considered, by the way.
Oh, I think, we're going to miss our boy Tyreek. Have fun in Miami, but I think at the end of the day, the wide receiver room might be a little bit better in Kansas City when it's all said and done. Top to bottom, not at the top.
Brad, have I told you about the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX?
No, I need to hear this.
Okay. So right now, big UFC fights coming up this week. I'm not a UFC guy. I'm a boxing guy, but boxing really doesn't matter anymore. So whatever. But if you are a UFC guy, or if you even want to make money, get on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, put down $5 on the fights this week, and get a load of this. Either way, you get $100 in free plays. New customers only, 21 and up, Arizona only, gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Okay, William. Now back to Arizona football. Jimino made an interesting point as
he does
occasionally, but Jimino made an interesting point where he said, it's really awesome to see, how well Arizona's recruiting right now. Great. He said, but where you're really going to start getting people's attention is when you start getting some of those linemen. He said, because those are the ones that are really, really difficult to come across. Will Arizona be able to get those types? Because it's been a long time.
I think they have to do better. And obviously, I think, I think the crazy thing about linemen is you can find diamonds in the rough there, I think more so than any position, with maybe the exception of wide receiver. But you have to start getting some higher profile guys, and you have to frankly be able to go to the portal and get some of these guys. But there's a lot of times you can find a guy who's 260 in high school as long as he has the right frame, and but you never know. It's such a crapshoot. I think that was along with quarterback. I mean, obviously people are like, why are all these 5-star quarterbacks not good? And why can't people evaluate in the NFL? It's the hardest position because it's the most important. But offensive line and frankly, defensive line is right there as well. Because, look at Stoops' era and the beginning of the Rich Rod era. How many 4-star linemen do they bring in, and how many of them were good?
And they all flopped.
And for different reasons.
Everyone was Keenan Walker.
Or, obviously, who was the kid who had the concussion issues and got hit in the head by Zendejas in the back of the head? You had some of that, too. And you had blood clots and you had things like that. But there was a curse of the 4-star. And then you bring in, as good as Evan Britton was, he might be the exception. But look at some of the best Stoops guys who played in the NFL. And they were just, I will give credit to some of that staff, but both Eric Wolford and then the guy who came after him who's still at Oklahoma, they knew how to evaluate linemen, and you knew they just looked for mean, tough kids, and they were able to find them. And that's what this staff has to do, because yes, you're going to be able to find some 4-stars. I think you can attract them, but you also have to be able to go to, Maricopa High School and find a kid who's, 250, but, has never eaten a lot of protein, or, that kid who grew 3 inches sophomore year, and suddenly he's 6'5", 280 when he was, 6'1". Maybe it's the second lineman at Chandler, not the first line. So you have to be able to find those guys, but at the same time, you've got to go and you got to pluck a few guys away from Oregon or Washington or USC. You've got to be able to go in and find those transfers and compete with these big schools for them. But at the same time, you got to develop in-house. You got to hope that your evaluators are able to find those diamonds in the rough, because frankly, especially on the lines where size is a premium, you got to be able to find those kids.
Yeah. And, and that's where it's really going to be the difference. Now, I always use this example too, like with Oregon football, in that Oregon was awesome during that reign with Chip Kelly. And again, I know they almost won a championship. And Sean Seeley, to answer your question, it's going to be on Pac-12 Network.
I think he wants to know about the time, and it's slotted in onto Pac-12 Network coverage as well.
By the way, real quick, speaking of the Pac-12, I like George Kaliakov's early moves, by the way. He's cutting some of the fat right here. I think he realized what a moron Larry Scott was, and they're saving a lot of money right now. I have no clue how it's going to turn out, but I think George Kliakov, off topic, gets it in a way that Larry Scott didn't, William.
Who knew that the guy who worked in casinos and in Vegas would trim the fat, and the guy who worked for the Women's Tennis Association would put
on
the teat of the Pac-12 presidents?
Very, very well put. Okay. But I've always thought, though, William, like Oregon football is a great example for me. They were a top 5-8 program for about a 6-year window under Chip Kelly. The problem, though, that I still thought with Oregon, and the only program that has always been able to marry the talent on the line and the skills is USC and its talent. Oregon was still always small across the offensive and defensive line. I know that they had your Armsteads and your DeForest Buckners, but there would still be a 260-pound tackle in there. And you just never really felt that they had the girth in there. And that's something I think that when you see it, you know it. And that's what Jamino, I think, was making. You know, when you really start seeing a real difference on the defensive and offensive line, that's when you know you're really headed towards something.
Yeah, you have to, frankly, you have to have athletic 320-pound tackles. You have to have that 300-pound nose tackle who can, do 1 and 2 gap technique, but yet still run in the open field. You have to, if you do have a 270-pound tackle, the other guy's got to be 310.
Right.
You can't line up Parker Zellers and a converted defensive end. It just doesn't work anymore. This game has gotten bigger. And frankly, that I think was, if you're going to have the biggest knock on the field on the Rich Rod era, it was his unwillingness to stockpile linemen. He would stockpile 5'8" receivers, but he just thought he could out X and O you, and that's why you had, again, Parker Zellers, no disrespect, but you can't have a 240-pound walk-on defensive lineman start for multiple years. You can't have walk-ons up and down the line. To me, my philosophy in sports is you can never have too many arms in baseball. You can never have too many bigs in basketball. Luke, you should have recruited Harry. And you cannot have too many linemen in football. Remember, the Giants teams under Parcells, what they do every year?
Just draft linemen. Leonard Marshall, we're picking you every single year.
Same thing at Arizona. When you have that 25th scholarship, go get me a 290-pound kid. I don't even care if he's that good. I always see people like, oh, why are they recruiting the Tucson kid? Well, yeah, you know what? Take a chance on a 290-pound Tucson kid who wants to come and work. Take a chance on a 290-pound, Phoenix kid who wants to work, or Las Cruces, New Mexico. Because you can always go find a 5'8" receiver to walk on. You can't find a 300-pound offensive lineman to walk on, except Jedd Fisch did 3 times this summer. Or at least twice. The one kid the Missouri kid via New Mexico is walking on. I think isn't Borjan walking on initially. But at the same time, again, people like, I don't know about Borjan. The guy's 6'8", 320.
Right.
So yeah, you take a chance on him.
If you miss big is what William is saying.
Yeah, as good as, Nate Phillips was, as good as Samaje Grant was,
there's limitations to it.
He also wasted scholarships on JT Washington and TJ something else. And yeah, if you're gonna set aside a couple of scholarships to take flyers on kids, I'd much rather it be, the 6'8" tight end who you can convert to tackle. Great, sign that kid. That's what you do at the bottom of your class, and if those kids flail out, oh well. I'd rather do that than, again, take another 5'8" receiver, 5'8" corner, because I can always go find those guys. I can't always find quality linemen, even if those quality linemen are projects.
You know what you can always find, though, is the DraftKings Sportsbook app, in a way that a sportsbook app that is as easily accessible. All right. Now you might be saying, Mike, basketball season's over. What can I bet on? All right, here's your answer. UFC tonight. All right, KB Thiel knows this stuff, and he's saying Peter Yan and Volk are good bets. I have no clue who these people are, but you know what? KB knows what he's talking about right there. Get on there, you put down $5 on the fights, and here's the kicker. You don't even need to win, and you still get $100 in free plays if you're a new customer only. William, it doesn't get much better than that, does it? No,
you know what gets better than that? You can bet on wrestling. And I don't mean college wrestling. I saw it. Did you do it? No, I didn't. But DraftKings was sponsoring AEW, which is a little bit of an embarrassing guilty pleasure of mine. But they were sponsoring the pay-per-view. And I know they were also doing prop bets on WrestleMania over the weekend. So if you really want to take advantage of those free plays after you win the UFC, go bet a little wrestling, you can call me or Shu, and we'll fill you in.
All right, now let's talk a little bit of U of A basketball right here. All right, KB Thiel agreeing with the great William Brad Alice. They also get hurt often, but they're not a dime a dozen. Great points right there. All right, the big question I think that people had about Tommy Lloyd, it probably has nothing to do with coaching at this point. I think that I think it's more than fair that we can see that Tommy Lloyd can coach. It was, what kind of recruiter is he? Well, again, you're looking at 2023 and a kid that we already had on this week, KJ Lewis, and another guy, Kylan Boswell. That's your starting backcourt for the future. And, oh, yeah, by the way, William, these are both two McDonald's All-American kids. So even though I think people are a little bit are questioning why he doesn't offer more kids, Tommy Lloyd knows what he's doing in this regard.
You know, and I'm not 100% because I'd like to see, and again, he's in a tough situation because he doesn't know what his roster is going to be like. I'm a little concerned with the lack right now of 2022 recruits, but you may only need 2 if, everyone stays. So that's why it's so tough. But, I know a lot of people were upset that he didn't get Ty. Well, Ty didn't do much. I mean, he was good. He's going to go get drafted.
Or were you really going to win a lot with Ty?
I don't know. Who's the kid at Creighton that everyone was? Arthur Kaluma.
Kaluma, yeah.
He's a nice player. He wouldn't have started on this team.
Correct.
He would have been the 4th big. I know people wanted Proctor. Duke's got some recruiting momentum, and that's going to be an interesting situation because I'm not sold. I'm not sold on a kid I called in recruiting back in the day. It's going to be a winning coach at Duke as a third.
Don Shire, tell the story.
Arizona recruited Shire. Here's the crazy story. Shire's from Chicago. Arizona's playing in the 5 Elite 8 in Chicago. Shire was in Tucson, not visiting Arizona, taking a vacation. And I'm trying to call the kid from the arena.
Wow.
I never did get a hold of him, but we knew he was going to Duke. But you got to do that for content. But he's not the only. There's a few other guys I called in recruiting who are now coaches. Most of them are like NBA assistants, but it makes me feel really old.
Yeah, well, no, it also should make you feel very important there, William. Now, let me ask you this. I think Tommy Lloyd is going to, as far as the transfer portal right now, the transfer portal's obviously changed things. John Schuster despises the transfer portal. He thinks it's going to destroy college athletics. I'm okay with the transfer portal, but this is going to be a year where I think the Houston game showed this to me a little bit, that I think Arizona needs to get more athletic at those guard positions, and that it just felt Kirk Kriisa, good, can do a lot of good stuff, Kyer, but it just felt like Houston's guards could get everywhere on the court that Arizona's guards couldn't necessarily. I'd like to see them address that in the portal. Where would you go with there, William?
Well, can I first tell you my pet peeve is everyone saying the transfer portals, the death of college. It's not the transfer portal itself. It's the free transfer rule. Mm-hmm. The portal existed for like 3 or 4 years now. But until COVID, you couldn't do a free transfer. You had to be a grad transfer. Right. So let's not blame the portal. Let's change the change in rules and say you get one free transfer, but somehow seems like kids have 8 or 9.
Right.
I think if you're using first you have to figure out what do you need. If you lose Koloko, suddenly you probably need 2 bigs. If you lose Terry and Matherin, and I just assume they're losing Matherin no matter what his Instagram says, but Terry's the guy you need back. But then you have to go get probably a couple wings. So I think a lot of it. But what I would like to see them do is go get some 22, 23-year-old grown men who are athletic and strong. Because that's what Houston was. Dallin Terry is far more athletic than I think almost anyone Houston has, but those guys are 2 years older and have been in the weight room. And we all know there's a difference in strength when you're 22, 23 and when you're 19.
Right.
And you even saw that with Kyer. Kyer just looked physically stronger than most of the Wildcats. Kim Aiken would have been that guy. And I think that's what you also need. You need kind of that grinder big. We know Ballo can hold his own. We know, if Koloko comes back another year in the weight room, he'll be fine. But I still think you need that, not necessarily offensively, but defensively, a Michael Wright, Ben Davis, 6'8", 250, 260, who can just put a shoulder into people, who can, when he boxes out, 19-year-old kids aren't getting around him.
Is Ballo good? I'm glad you brought up Ben Davis because I've asked this a lot. Is Ballo good enough to be a Ben Davis in 2 or 3 years?
I don't know if he'll ever be that athletically skilled. Davis is really skilled, but he's 4 inches, 5 inches taller.
You're right.
Probably just as strong.
Can
now.
he have that kind of impact?
Yeah, I think he could. I think he can.
Because Ben Davis is one of the most underrated big men in school history.
Yeah, I mean, people forget just how big and strong that guy was.
Right.
You know, and again, Lute used to bring in quite a few of those guys, and then, unfortunately, in many ways, a lot of those guys are now playing tight end or fighting UFC, frankly.
Right.
But yeah, so I think you need some strength on the inside, but they still have to be athletic.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, the two guys who you always wonder if they could just process the game a split second faster were, ironically enough, Ira Lee and Dennis Lattimore, who athletically and build wise were perfect power forwards.
Right.
They were just always about a half, split, not even half, a quarter second away from fully processing what was going on. And that was the difference between them and Ben Davis and Michael Wright and even a guy like Anthony Cook.
Okay, now, Sean Seeley. Saguaro grad, by the way, Sean Seeley. Us Cougars stick together around here. With Boswell and Lewis coming in, what does this mean for Kirk Kriisa? Here's my opinion on Kirk Kriisa. I think Kirk Kriisa's grown on me in that he's definitely a kid that embraces a big moment. He made a lot of big shots this year. He was the guy that he could be 2 of 14, but you know what? Within the last 3 minutes of a game, he could knock down 2 threes. What concerns me about him is I don't know that athletically he is necessarily what you need as a Final Four caliber point guard. And quite frankly, as weird as this is to say, I also don't know that he's a good enough shooter. The shot looks great, but Brad, we got a year and a half sample size now where he's essentially a 34% shooter from the field and 34 from 3.
Okay, first of all, is he going to be here? That'll be his 4th year in the program.
Right.
So he'll either be a 4th year junior / senior. And if he's worried about minutes, then he probably turns pro and goes to Europe, assuming the situation's good there. We have no idea.
Right.
There's also the very real possibility that, he's out there with those two guys.
Right.
We've seen that Tommy Lloyd has no problem playing 3 guards. All 3 of those guys are fairly big. I think they're all 6'3" or bigger, if I'm not mistaken. And I know Lewis is like 6'5". So Lewis could easily be the Dallin Terry role because we assume Terry's gone by then. If he comes back, he's not going to be here another year after that. We don't know what else. Sure you have Adama Ball, sure you have Noel, but again, I don't know. So I think there's enough minutes to go around if Kriisa wants to accept that role.
Right.
And again, I think there's pretty close to a guarantee that Boswell and Lewis are as good as advertised, but you never know. One of those guys might have to come off the bench.
Right.
The bigger question is, what does that mean for Larson? What does that mean for Ball? What does that mean for Noel? Because, I could see Adama Ball. Is he a point guard? He might be. He played it in France. So, we don't know what he is.
Right.
So there's a lot, a lot of people, we're so spoiled by the one and done era, or even the 2 and done, where a guy's fully formed by the end of his freshman year. Look at, even Matherin was a slow starter. We forget there are Solomon Hills and Gabe Yorks and guys who take 2 or 3 years. So, by the time those 2 guys get here, it may not be them who chases Kirk Kriisa off. It may be Adama Ball. Or maybe someone else, who knows how good Larson is in 3 years.
You know where I really realized, though, that Tommy Lloyd has big plans for Adama Ball was when you're in the Pac-12 tournament right there and you're in the NCAA tournament, and he's trying to find times to sneak him in. Lute would do that with guys that he thought like in a year could maybe possibly be that. And again, it's overlooked. You look in the box score, it's 3 or 4 minutes, but they would try. Coaches that have big plans for players generally try to do that towards the end of the year. I'll give you an example. And again, I'd love to be wrong on this. I don't really see Shane Noel being a guy here. But it wasn't Shane Noel that he was trying to sneak in at the end of games when it really mattered. It was Adama Ball there, William.
But it's not even at the end of games. Using Lute as the example. Remember when he'd sneak Dickerson in the first half?
Yep, exactly.
You want to go way back.
JT was another example late in that freshman
Do you
season.
remember? And he didn't stay. He ended up transferring. Do you remember Eddie Curry?
Mm-hmm.
Played at Marquette. Lute would sneak him at the end of the first half.
Did he follow KO to Marquette?
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did. And he ended up being a fringe. I think he played, an hour and a half in the NBA. But he was a guy who, he'd get that run at the end of games. But all of a sudden, there'd be 4 minutes left in the second half or in the first half. He'd play, a minute and then come out. But it was a key minute.
Right.
And it wasn't like what Lute did with Jason Gardner, where John Ash would come in for a minute because Gardner had played 29 minutes or whatever it was, right. 19 minutes in the first half. These were just to get him out there with the 4 other quality starters, and that's what he's done with Ball. Assuming Mathurin, again, I think we have to assume Mathurin doesn't come back, although I think it's interesting that he hasn't said anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
Ball's in the rotation, and could I see Ball potentially leapfrogging? Yeah, I could. And again, someone said, I might want to see Kriisa off the ball. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Kriisa, what Kriisa reminds me of is a more athletic, more cocky version of what Lute did in the early 90s with the Mats.
I was going to say with Matt Offick
and Matt Muehlbach, where they were frankly, Kerr and McMillan were interchangeable. The Mats were interchangeable, and to a lesser extent, Khalid and Damon were interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
Khalid played point guard until Damon assumed the role.
Right.
And then there were many times where if Damon was the hot shooter that game, suddenly Khalid was handling the ball a little bit more. So I could certainly see, and Miller experimented with this as well, but the double combo guard or even triple combo guard, because I think Pelle Larsson is essentially a combo guard. I think Kyer, that's what they did this year anyways, but I could easily see all of a sudden you see someone else bringing the ball up and Kerr is playing off the ball and being just as, if not more effective.
All right. He's William Brad Allis. Follow him on Twitter, WSR Brad. Make sure to check out PHNX. All the best stuff covered all throughout the state. You get a membership. You get a free t-shirt, all kinds of cool stuff there. Hit subscribe on the AZ Wildcats podcast. Brad, if possible, I'd like to do this weekly with you, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, got some time. This is my lunch break, so I'm going to go have to, eat while working. But I love doing it. Love being on with you. You know that.
For sure. All right. For Brad Allis, everybody that contributed, appreciate all of you. We'll be back up with you tomorrow. Spring football game post game show right here on the AZ Wildcats podcast.